for this particular service, the two outcomes of focusing on favor. The two outcomes, but this is beginning at 8:15 service of a series of sermons that will probably take us for a few weeks called Joseph's Journey. So much is lost when we rush through it, and so I was led by God to pause a little while because Joseph's journey in some ways resemble our journey. At some point you will lock up with Joseph and you will identify with what Joseph went through at some point in these series of sermons. You know, it's in order to appreciate how high the mountain is that has been climbed, you got to appreciate how deep the valley was that you had to go through. We see Joseph as prime minister and we celebrate what God did for him after years of struggle. But many times we rush through the valley experiences. We only seem to know him as that young man that was favored by his father, had a multicolored coat, and we know him as that man that became Pharaoh's right hand in Egypt. But there's so much more to Joseph's experience when we begin to slow it down just a little bit. And we talk about favor, but sometimes we look at favor from a one-dimensional point. When we look at Joseph's life, yes, Joseph had favor, but in the first service we started off talking about the fact that Joseph, he came through there are two outcomes of focusing on favor. We'll get to them in a minute, but we look at Joseph's life, and the first thing about it, yes, he had favor from his father, but slow down. Before he had favor from his father, yes, his mother did have another son by the name of Benjamin. She did have this young man, but in the midst of childbirth, Rachel loses her life. Benjamin is born, but now the so-called favored Joseph is a young man but doesn't have a mother. Sometimes we look at favor, we forget about the other side of the coin. Here he is growing up with no mother in his life. Here he is growing up and his aunt has been in competition with his mother. So I doubt there's a whole lot of love there. The maid servants, Bilhah and Zilpah were drawn into the struggle and the competition. So I don't think there was much nurturing there also. So before you become jealous of somebody else, sometimes you need to remember, think back that maybe they had to go through some stuff to get where they are right now. Sometimes we see the end of the story, but we don't see the beginning of how the story began. Sometimes there were tears all night long before they got the promotion. They studied hard while other folk were asleep before they got the job. They prayed while other folk were playing before the Lord blessed them. They had to wait a long time and give God praise and pay their tithes and keep waiting on God before the breakthrough came. But it seems like sometime as soon as the breakthrough comes, here come the haters committee. I told you there are two possibilities of focusing on favor. Joseph's brothers, I'm going to go to it for a moment. Joseph's brothers lost track of the fact that just because he was favored in one way didn't mean that Joseph did not have to have some hard times in his life. And there are some people that the only time they seem to notice people is when they come out on top. But they forget about all the hard times. And I want you to know there's some people that might hate on you. And don't you lose sleep worrying about your haters, because they don't even know what you went through to get where you are right now. Don't you worry about them, but you have learned to give God glory, because if it had not been for the Lord, thank you, Holy Ghost, who was on your side, you wouldn't have made it yourself. But because God opened doors no man can close. See, I don't care how hard you study, how much you pray, God got to open some doors for you. Yes, I don't care how charismatic you are, how many degrees you have. There are other people got just as many degrees as you do, and they're homeless right now. But God can plan all you want. But you never know who's down on their knees calling on God. And there's a God who's able to override man's plan. They can plan to get rid of you, but God said, I'm moving you to a better place. So don't you cry when they walk you out the door. Sometimes you can't grab hold of this until you let go of that. There's some blessings on the other side of through. Then they tempted me, young as I was when I left there. They asked me, after giving me hell, they asked me, is there anything that we can do? I ain't always been where I am now. I wasn't Pastor Baldwin then. But I heard Mom and Dad saying, you better not tell them what you want to tell them they can do right now. And I also learned you don't burn bridges, because you never know who you're going to need to get back on the other side with. So I just smiled and said, no, thank you. But I do testify that God is able. So when people are hating on you, they don't know the tears you shed. They don't know how God had to provide a way for you. But when God brings you through, don't you be so proud and stuck up that you don't mind telling the world that it was the Lord who made a way for you. Tell them it was the Lord who kept you when you wanted to lose your mind. Tell them it was the Lord who kept you when you wanted to walk up in there and cuss everything out in the office. Tell them it was the Lord who kept you when you wanted to act a fool. Am I the only one in here that can say, God, thank you for keeping me when I didn't want to be kept? Thank you for holding my tongue when I didn't want to hold my tongue. But I look back over my life now and I say, I found out that his way is the right way. So I give him glory to encourage somebody else. You may be crying right now, but truly weeping will endure for a night. But joy is coming in the morning. So let the haters hate. For I heard the Bible say he prepares a table before me in the presence of my haters. He anoints my head with oil in the presence of my haters. He waits on me. God becomes my waiter. My cup overflows in the presence of my enemy. And just in case they try to sneak up on my back, surely goodness and mercy, they're walking behind